Like, you're being sized up as a Secret Service agent at all times by the crowd. Maybe you're being sized up in a good way, right? Like, agents all the time get this on a rope line. Man, you look like a Secret Service agent. I'm glad you're here protecting. Thank you for being here protecting us and protecting our president. Okay, maybe you're being sized up in a good way, but you're still being sized up, right? Yeah. Or maybe you're being sized up in a bad way, like, I want to kill that guy, but those three right there, I don't think I could get to him. But those two right there, you know, like, so to think that that's not happening to you, you didn't pay attention in training, because it is.
Okay, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Yeah, good morning. Joe Scargill, Special Agent in charge of the Jacksonville Field Office, United States Secret Service.
Secret Service. Okay, can you tell me what your responsibilities are down here as the Special Agent in charge in Jacksonville?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on, Niles. I
Absolutely.
really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. I'm a fan of your podcast.
Appreciate it.
You've had some wild characters on, so hopefully I can live up. And you know, just a quick disclaimer, I have permission from my agency to be on here today from our media relations branch, but I am not representing the Secret Service as an official spokesperson on this podcast. This is just me, myself, my observations based on my 25+ year career here. So just for my protection, more than anything else, I just wanted to get that out up front. Yeah. But yeah, again, I'm the Special Agent in charge of the Secret Service in Jacksonville, Florida. So we have what we call districts. So my district here covers North Florida. So I cover from the Florida-Georgia line across the Panhandle, you know, to Alabama. So I have, you know, Panama City and Tallahassee and Pensacola, and then down south to the Daytona Beach area. Okay. And so Florida's divided up. We have 4 major field offices here: Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Miami. So I'm North Florida, so the king of the North, as they say.
How many agents do you supervise?
You know, not getting into specific numbers, but we would be what you would consider like a small to medium size office. Okay. We have, you know, our main kind of our regional hub is here in Jacksonville, Florida. You're in our office right now, and then we have satellite offices in Tallahassee, Pensacola, Panama City, across the Panhandle.
Okay. So when you're in a office that's like, say, you're not guarding the president, you're in satellite offices, you're in Jacksonville, what do Secret Service guys do on a day-to-day basis?
They travel and do protection in other cities. Okay. So, you know, a lot of people, you know the Secret Service for protection, right? The big guys with dark sunglasses and dark suits protecting the president, and also, you know, to be transparent, some of our recent failures. But the Secret Service actually started as an investigative agency, and we've maintained that dual mission, you know, for almost 200 years. So in 1865, after the Civil War was over, the North and the South came together. Well, when that happened, about 1/3 of all currency in circulation was counterfeit money. The Confederate states were printing their own currency, and then when the war's over, the nation comes back together. That currency flooded the economy and destabilized the dollar globally. So President Lincoln needed to deal with this. So there was a military detachment called the Secret Service. So he deputized them and gave them the mission of suppressing counterfeit money. So we have our roots in protecting the financial infrastructure of the United States. It wasn't until 1901, when McKinley was assassinated, that we picked up protection on the president. So full time. Okay. So, you know, still to this day, when my agents aren't traveling supporting protective operations, we're conducting investigations, financial crimes investigations. Now that mission has changed drastically, right? So when I started, counterfeit was still very prevalent, counterfeit money. Yeah. Now 2025, I mean, do you even have money in your wallet? I don't have any cash in my wallet. I use Apple Pay or, you know, so as the crime changed, right, to a more electronic type of crime, the Secret Service, you know, adjusted its profile and moved to more electronic crimes investigations. So honestly, here in North Florida, we don't do that many counterfeit investigations. Very rarely will we even get counterfeit money. It's more of these electronic crime fraud type schemes, elder care fraud, money laundering, crypto fraud, pig butchering, schemes like that, more advanced technology schemes. And
wait, pig butchering? What's that?
yeah, so that's that's a term used to where you'll have a criminal. Most of the time they're foreign, and they'll target an individual, whether they're elderly or a vulnerable adult, and just run all types of scams on them and cut them up like a pig, right? So whether it's email compromises, phishing scams, romance scams, exploitation, and those are what we're seeing a lot of now.
Okay.
So back in the day, I know you have a background in the DA, counterfeit money, it was like working dope. You'd go out, you'd buy a sample, you'd arrange for a bigger deal, you'd insert an undercover, you'd set up a buy bus location, and it was, we were out on the street a lot doing that type of thing, and a lot of these, new crimes, next generation financial crimes are done behind a keyboard, and we're targeting suspects all over the world. So much different than when I started, but it's definitely bigger fish.
What do you think the breakdown is between what your agents do protective-wise versus an investigation like that?
Well, right now our protective tempo is extremely high. We're just coming out of a campaign year where it was intense. Like even as a SAC, I was out. Yeah. I was RFK Jr.'s detail leader during his run for president. So it was a manpower drain like I've never seen in the 25 plus years I've been on the job. We had folks everywhere. I mean, I was out for like 6 weeks at a time, not home, and that wore on a lot of our people, and quite frankly, we did the best we could with investigations, and some of the things we do have now that we didn't is I have non-agents in the office. Like I have forensic analysts, I have investigative analysts that are able to kind of pick up the ball and run with those investigations when the agents get tapped to do protection, and that's something when I started on the job we didn't have, and it's just a great force multiplier now to kind of drive these investigations forward. And quite frankly, these folks have advanced computer skills, advanced technology skills. They're able to search databases that, I'm a dinosaur, man. I don't even know how to log into those damn things. but these folks can really do some amazing complex stuff using technology, again, to drive these investigations forward and get good attribution and prosecution on these suspects.
But if somebody's watching this podcast and they're interested in what Secret Service does, they're interested in becoming a Secret Service agent, not like up-tempo, coming off a campaign,
yeah.
What do you think the percentage is, guarding, protecting somebody versus the investigative type stuff?
Okay, so I think it'd be easier to kind of talk about how, like, the life cycle of an agent. Yeah. And that would kind of maybe, because it can go different ways depending on where you are and what choices you make in your career. Does that work?
Absolutely.
So when we talk about the Secret Service and an agent, right, we also have a uniform division that we can talk about later. Yeah. But as an agent, there's 3 phases to your career, right? Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, generally, right? And there's all kinds of branches off of those you can take. And mine has been like on a side road, breaking through a detour sign and getting spun out, getting a flat tire and back, So my choices and the way my career's gone is really non-traditional. But traditionally, there's 3 phases to your career. So phase 1. So, hey, Niles, congratulations, you've been hired, to be a special agent with the Secret Service. You're going to start in the Jacksonville field office, okay? So you go through the training academy. It's about 8 months long. We go to 2 separate facilities. One, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is right here in Glencoe, Georgia. It's about an hour up the road. And then we have our own Secret Service Academy, which is outside of Washington, D.C. So you do, I think it's up to about 8 months now. You graduate training, you come back to your office. So how it works in the office is you'll start conducting some of these investigations, right, with a mentor and a senior agent. If you're in a bigger office like LA, New York, Chicago, you get put into a squad. So we would have, the financial crime squad, the counterfeit squad, the protective intelligence squad, and then you get kind of put in that squad and you'd work those type of investigations. While doing that, since we do have that dual mission, you'd be on periodic protective rotations. So let's say, hey, Niles, okay, this year you're going to be on protective rotation April, September, November, and January. So during that month, at any time, you can get an email. In my day, it would be, we had like a ticket printer in the office, so they'd print like hard boarding passes out for you. You hear that thing going, you're like, oh man, here we go, right? But now you get an electronic ticket, and it would just say, hey, you've been selected for, an assignment to stand post for President Trump at Mar-a-Lago down in, West Palm Beach. Leave tomorrow. It's a 2-week assignment. And so for that time, you would go down there and you would fulfill your protective responsibilities down in Mar-a-Lago. And again, if you had one of those investigations going here, either your partner or one of these administrative and technical staff would kind of drive that investigation for you while you're gone. So depending on the size of the office, the amount of people that you have on the rotation and what percentage of the rotation they're pulling, you could be on, a travel rotation maybe, 4 or 5 times a year, and you could get called never, or you could get called every day out during that rotation, right? It just kind of depends on what the protective tempo is, right? And quite frankly, the protectee, right, and what their pattern of life is. So, some presidents, travel all the time, some don't. Some vice presidents travel all the time, some don't. Some go and they like to stay, in their secondary home or whatever, some don't. So it really is dependent on who's in office and what their pattern of life is like. And family size also kind of dictates how much protection, right? So if you have a president that has, a lot of kids, a lot of grandkids, well, they all receive Secret Service protection. So that's more people that are out doing protection, right? So that's kind of your phase 1 career, right? And you really kind of cut your teeth and learn protection, you learn investigations, and really importantly, you kind of learn this culture of the Secret Service, right? Because I think every one of our federal agencies, even local and state, have their own culture. I'm sure DEA has a culture. And then you would go to phase 2. So as they say now, it didn't always used to be like this, but now mostly all roads lead to Washington, D.C., where the bulk of our manpower is, right? And that's where the Presidential Protection Division, right, PPD, the Vice Presidential Protection Division is, our intelligence division's there, and then we have, our special operations team, like our counter-assault team, our counter-surveillance team. Those are all, headquartered in Washington, D.C. So that's phase 2 of your assignment. So all roads lead there, and those are straight protection. So no investigative work whatsoever. You would be, okay, Niles, hey, thanks for your time. Generally, 3 to 4 years in your first field office in your phase 1. Again, people may watch this. I hope they watch it, right? And then you go, I was in my office for 7 years. I was only in mine for 2. Look, everybody's career is different, right? And you can make different choices that can change that. And sometimes you could just get caught up in the numbers game, and that could change too. But generally, 4 years in your first office, and then you go to your protection assignment, right? And then you spend all your time doing 100% protection. So, hey, Niles, it was great having you here in Jacksonville. Your 4 years are up. Congratulations, you're going to the President's detail. So you go up to Washington, D.C., go back through some training, and then you're on the President's detail. And this is where you're working the shift, which is close protection for the President, and you're traveling, doing advance work for the President. So let's say the President wants to come to Jacksonville, Florida. I would build my team out to support that, and we would call that our advance team, right? And we would have someone would be assigned to every role that you can think of, right? We'd have, a lead advance who is the overall person that coordinates the overall visit to the area. Then we would have, someone responsible for the motorcade, someone responsible for the tactical assets, the cyber stuff. It gets very compartmentalized. Well, someone from the President's team, they send counterparts down. So we would have 2 people working together, one from the President's detail, one from the local field office.
Do you have an opinion? I think Dan Bongino brought this up at one point. Do you have an opinion, one way or another, if you guys should only be focusing on protection versus not doing any investigative work?
So I know Dan. Him and I taught together in the training academy. So I know Dan very well, friend of mine. Look, our investigative mission has helped drive our protective mission, in my opinion. Okay, again, and this is just Joe Scargill's opinion. This isn't the position of the Secret Service. But for me, who spent the majority of my career in field offices, we build a lot of relationships with our local and state agencies doing investigations, a lot of relationships. When we have a visit of a protectee, we get a tremendous amount of support from those local and state agencies. We couldn't do our job without them. From a manpower perspective, we couldn't, for instance, President Trump came to the Daytona 500, which is in my district. I mean, this is a huge event, 150,000 people. We don't have the Secret Service agents to secure that the Daytona Motor Speedway ourselves, right? And even if we did, we don't have the area knowledge of Daytona that Volusia County Sheriff's Office does, right? So we rely on our state and local partners to support us on these missions. Well, when we don't have a protection assignment, we work investigations with them. We assist them with their investigations. If they have an investigation that kind of gets out of their scope, maybe a large financial fraud investigation that has overseas ties and there's suspects and victims overseas, right? And a local or state agency doesn't have the resources to reach out overseas. We partner with them on those investigations, and then, could potentially pursue federal charges on those folks. So we build some equity with these agencies doing investigations. We also provide quite a bit of cyber training for these folks. So we have the NCFI, National Cyber Forensic Institute in Alabama, and we send local and state officers through that training to get trained the same way Secret Service forensic examiners do, so that they can have that in their agency, right? And that's all driven through our investigations. Also, again, just my opinion, I think being an investigator, you look at things differently, right? And you kind of have that eye for suspicion, and that's not to say if we didn't do straight protection, we wouldn't do it well. I believe we would, 100%. But the investigations I've never seen them interfere with a protective operation. They just don't, right? And that's a leadership issue, right? And as the agent in charge here in Jacksonville, and I think any of my peers would agree, former or current on the job, if you have a protective mission in your district, that is the mission, right? That is the mission, and that's not. It's not, hey, sorry, sir, you can't come down this week. We have a pretty big financial crimes investigation going on, right? We have a pretty good way of handling that so that we can satisfy both those requirements pretty well.
Can you talk about, I know State Department, Diplomatic Security Service, who are you guys responsible for? I know that each agency may,
Great question. Yeah. So we have authority to protect people under two different mechanisms. So number one is United States Code, right? 18 U.S.C. 3056 gives us the authority for protection. We protect under that, we protect the president, his family while in office, the vice president, their family, including the second lady, and then former presidents and first ladies and children of former presidents up to 18 years old.
Okay.
Then we also have a second, and visiting foreign heads of state. So the president, for instance, President Zelensky's first trip to the United States when he was president before the war and all that started, I was his detail leader. So he would get Secret Service protection when he comes here. Or, if the president of even the smallest country you can think of comes here, they get Secret Service protection. If the president of Israel comes here, Secret Service protection. President of Russia comes here, Secret Service protection. There's a second way we have authority to protect people. So that's who we protect by statute.
Okay.
The second way we protect people is under executive order. So this is when the president says, okay, you, Joe Scargill, Secret Service, I want you to protect Robert F. Kennedy while he's running for president. Right. So then we would spin up a detail and do that. Or there's cabinet officials that have Secret Service protection. National Security Advisor, the Chief of Staff. Those are all executive order protectees where the president says, hey, due to the following reasons, you will protect that person.
Okay.
Okay. So we don't protect governors. We don't protect ambassadors. We don't protect members of Congress or Senate.
Okay. Before I forget this, because you've mentioned Robert RFKJ, and again, we'll delete anything that you can't talk about.
Yeah.
Were you on the detail when that guy, I think he pretended to be like a marshal or something to get through to him? Is that RFKJ?
I don't think that was him. I didn't. It might have been before he had protection, but that definitely not when he had protection.
Okay. Maybe I'm getting that confused with the guy who tried to get after one of the Supreme Court justices.
Maybe. Yeah, that would. And we don't protect Supreme Court justices. They have their own police and protection force.
Yeah, no, anyway, I just thought I'd ask.
No, we didn't have.
I thought somebody had tried to get to him.
So. No, not. I mean, under our protection, we didn't have that incident. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's get into your career. But before we do, tell me about where'd you grow up?
So grew up Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Very, very mediocre upbringing, right? Mom got divorced from my dad when I was young, and we lived with my grandparents, myself, my mom, my brother. Went to Catholic parochial school. My mom remarried my stepdad, and we kind of had a Brady Bunch family. So he had 3 children from a previous marriage. So we all moved in together in Delaware County, suburb of Philadelphia. Spent my high school time there, and I was not really exceptional at anything, Niles, to be honest with you. I was a pretty average guy. Had friends, but not super popular. Was a good athlete, but not incredible. And grew up there, and went out of state for college. So I guess I should touch on this a little bit more. So my stepdad was a great guy. He was an independent insurance agent. Nothing to do with law enforcement, but really worked hard and took care of the family, and he treated my brother and I like his own kids. I mean, there was no. If you saw us out, you would never say like, "Oh, that's not his real dad." Just a great guy. I had very limited contact with my real father once I got to be those early teenage years, and then I've had no contact with him since then. So, but he was a police officer, and he was a Philly cop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So maybe somewhere genetically that's kind of embedded in the back of my head. Mm-hmm. But
no, wait a minute. Your stepdad or your real dad?
My real dad.
Your real dad?
Yeah, my real dad. My stepdad was an insurance agent.
Wow,
yeah.
So that's interesting. So you never really had any interaction with him, but
I did. I mean, we would do the weekends thing,
yeah.
Every other weekend or whatever, till I was like preteen, early teen maybe.
Yeah.
But then, it's been, probably 30, 40 years since I've talked to him.
But do you think, and this is the question I always ask, was there something that happened when you were growing up that led you to law enforcement? And do you think back in your mind, maybe because your dad was law enforcement, that maybe that kind of drove you there?
I mean, maybe, but it wasn't, not consciously. Not consciously. So I can tell you how I got into it. I went to college out in Ohio. I was a member of the wrestling team at Ohio State.
The Ohio State?
The Ohio State. It turned to the Ohio State. I want to say it was my sophomore year when it rebranded.
Yeah.
Because I remember we had like ASAC shoes, and we had Pepsi vending machines, and then Nike and Coke took over the contracts. So I don't want to speak for Ohio State, but I was in the room, but I wasn't a standout athlete there at all.
But if you're on the wrestling team at Ohio State,
I was in the room. I was in the room. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about wrestling. I built quite an index of technique and coaching skills. But not quite the athletic career I wanted to have. Mm-hmm. But such is life. So. Yeah. What happened was my eligibility was up, and I still needed to finish school. So I was, doing, working and finishing up school, and I was working out in a gym in Dublin, Ohio. I told this story before on a podcast. It was a World's Gym. I don't even know if it's there anymore. But it was kind of like an old school like powerlifting gym. Like, believe it or not, Columbus, Ohio was like a mecca of powerlifting back in the day. I don't know if you're familiar with West Side Barbell. It's like this historic weightlifting, powerlifting place on the west side of Columbus. Louis Simmons, who I think he's passed away, he's been on Joe Rogan and everything. Like, you know, so anyway, it was one of those gyms. Well, I was working out in there and I met these two Columbus police officers, and you know, they were cool guys, and I you know, just got to be friendly with them, and they had talked to me more and more about the police, and it seemed like a cool job, and I needed to figure something out, and I had done a summer working in my stepdad's insurance agency, and I knew I didn't want to do that, you know, and so I applied to the police department and got hired. So was with the Columbus Police Department really short time, and then
How old are you?
21.
Okay, so 21 in Ohio.
I'm sorry, 22.
22. No prior military.
No military, no law enforcement, no desire to be in law enforcement, but needed to figure something out.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't want to sit in an office, man. You know, like I thought my whole high school and most of my college career, I'm like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to work in my dad's insurance agency, and that's going to be my thing. I had a property casualty insurance license when I was 18 years old. I passed the test and all that, but it just wasn't for me, man. You know, and I just have a personality that's probably not conducive to being in an environment like that. I don't know. I can't sit still, and it just wasn't for me. So a little bit of time with the police department. So, you know, there's a recurring theme in my life. Like I get rejected and then it works out, right? So applied to the police department, got rejected, applied again, you know, a little while later, and got picked up. So I had a cousin that was a Secret Service agent.
Okay, well, wait a minute. Before we get to Secret Service, I want to talk to you a little bit about your time with the police department. You're 22 years old. You don't have any military experience. I'm assuming you're going through some sort of academy, a little bit militaristic and stuff. How is that for you as basically a young man?
I loved it. So it was a military style academy. A lot of yelling and screaming. You know, really good time, and it was stressful, but you didn't live there, right? So you could always go home, back to your apartment at night. But it was. I don't know if the academy is still like this anymore, but it was a, you know, I think they called it phase training, right? Where it's, you know, the first third of it is like a boot camp where they try to wash people out, and then. But I was in good shape because I was a college athlete. Not a good college athlete, but I was a college athlete. So the physical stuff was difficult, but it wasn't something that stressed me out. And I want to talk about this, you know, later when we talk about recruiting for the Secret Service. So. Like, I didn't have to worry about the push-ups, the sit-ups, the running, and things like that, which is a huge weight off your shoulder, right? You went through the DA Academy, right? Like, if you're not worried about that, like, look, you could make anything hard to where I wouldn't be able to do it. Like, again, I'm not an amazing athlete. I wasn't a triathlete. But, I mean, I was a Division I college wrestler, right? Like, you can run and do push-ups and pull-ups. So that part of the academy, although it was physically demanding, it wasn't something that I stressed out about, right? So like my mental focus was towards the other stuff. So, and same thing in the Secret Service Academy. You know, I wasn't worried about the physical stuff because I was prepared, right? I was prepared physically. So, I could focus on the firearms. Like you had asked me, you know, off camera about the Secret Service firearms. It's tough, right? It's a high standard. So I could really, you know, pour my attention and my stress into that and the classroom work and the protective methodology. I didn't have to worry about, oh shit, am I going to make this mile-and-a-half run, or am I going to be able to hit, you know, however many pull-ups? That part was covered, right? So I would say anybody watching this, if you want to get into law enforcement or military, like, that part, make that automatic, man.
It boggles. I mean, we've talked about this on different podcasts that I've done interviews, but it just boggles my mind. People apply for a position and then they come in, they can't pass the physical standards on like the first test.
Every week.
What are you guys doing?
We have it every week. We have a physical fitness screening for potential recruits, and it's part of the hiring process. And people fail it. And I just don't understand. My brain doesn't work the way to be able to understand that.
I'm getting a little bit digress a little bit from what my initial question is.
This is a podcast, man.
But how has this, over the course of your career, have you seen recruits' mentality change in terms of maybe how they approach, or maybe even when you first started, did you ever see somebody come in and not being able to pass, as opposed to now you have people come in that just can't pass?
So, all of us are guilty of having like revisionist history and saying like, well, in my day, we never would have had an applicant that would have, so I'm sure there were, right? I'm sure there were. I don't think there's like an epidemic of people who can't pass PT now in 2020. But I think there's a couple things, right? So I think that if you don't really want to do this job, and you're just kind of like, well, this sounds neat, or it's a job, then it's going to be harder to be prepared for this job. So for instance, like I wanted to be a Secret Service agent. Like, I'll answer your question kind of where we left off there. So my cousin was a Secret Service agent. Okay. And he was a great guy. He wrestled in college as well. So we had a lot in common. And he was like, hey, it's an awesome career. You got to apply. You've got to come on this job. And he would tell me about it. And it was just like, man, it sounded like everything I wanted to do was travel, protection, street work investigations with the counterfeit. A lot of guys had, that kind of athlete mentality that he would talk to me about. So applied to the Secret Service, got rejected, got a little bit more experience, applied again, got hired. But I really wanted to do this job. So I joked around and be like, man, I would have done this for free. Like, it's awesome, right? And so there's a huge sector that we didn't have in 2000 that we have now, and it's this IT sector, right? So like, you've got people now that are competing. You're competing to try to get with Apple, Microsoft, IBM, and then how many other these tech companies, Snapchat, Facebook, Meta. Well, they didn't have any of that. They didn't have email when I went to college. Yeah. They didn't have social media when I was a new agent. So you've got this huge pool of potential candidates that have this whole other industry that quite frankly, wasn't there. Like I think in 2000, I knew Microsoft and IBM, right? Like that was it. Yeah. And I'm sure there was more. But my point being is that this tech industry is now, probably the largest industry for educated professionals in America, maybe in the world. But those people that that job didn't exist when I applied to the Secret Service and when I was a young agent. Now it does. So I think there's a lot more competition for good applicants outside of law enforcement, to be honest with you. So, I don't want to disparage the younger generation by saying like, hey, like maybe off camera, I will a little bit, but like their priorities are different, but man, they have more options than I did. Yeah.
Yeah. One question I had before we start talking about Secret Service. When you're 21, 22 years old and you're starting off with a PD and you don't have a bunch of life experience, I'm assuming you're on patrol at some point, right?
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, how is your first day on patrol where you're like, okay, you got to figure it out. You have to figure out how to interact with people.
You don't have a lot of life experience, but I think, and again, I'm gonna get a bunch of nut. I think if you're physically prepared, you have a mental mindset that allows you to interact with people better, right? And so like, we talked off camera. Like I've been doing jiu-jitsu for years and years and years, but I had a pretty strong wrestling background before that. So I felt not confident, but I felt comfortable in interactions with people that may not be pleasant. Okay. And I felt like I could conduct myself properly in those interactions. So, you know, and it's and I still say that now. Like people ask, like, you know, like does jiu-jitsu and this and the fit, like, does it give you confidence? It doesn't give me confidence, but it gives me comfort, so that I can talk to someone and I can interact with someone, and I know that unless this person is highly trained, which most people are not, right? But that I feel comfortable that regardless of how this goes, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, but with a little bit of concern, right? But so again, like I can't tell people enough that if you're thinking about going into a career like this, the more you can physically prepare yourself, it's going to bleed into your mental preparation, right? And you're going to be better at everything. I'm telling you, you are.
I just got done doing an interview with Eric Levine, 2 Cops, 1 Donut. He is pretty proficient at jiu-jitsu. I don't think he's a black belt like you are, but you know, he was talking about, look, I think there should be a standard across all law enforcement, at least having a blue belt. You have any impression, any opinion about that?
Yeah, so I mean, like, and I don't know Eric, but look, I agree with that. Obviously, like, I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I teach jiu-jitsu. I teach jiu-jitsu to civilians. I teach jiu-jitsu to police officers. You know, we could do a whole podcast on why I think it's the best system for law enforcement. But the thing is this, like, yeah, we should. How?
Yeah.
How, right? Like, we talked off camera, like, the Secret Service as well as these other departments, like, you know, we have manpower issues.
Right.
Okay. We have retention issues. We have application, you know, getting through people through our hiring process. So now on top of that, you want to say, okay, well now you all got to learn jiu-jitsu at a blue belt level. So I think you got to be careful of putting a standard like that in, because like, what if somebody's just not good at it?
Yeah.
Do you fire them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So look, no one more than me in the world would love to see every police officer in America trained in jiu-jitsu and at a blue belt level. I think that should be a standard. I think we need to start focusing on how we do it instead of just saying it and like puffing our chest up and being like, yep, that's what we should do. Okay, that sounds great. Like I remember listening to one podcast, and it was a super successful podcaster, and the guy was like, I can't understand these people who, you know, don't like their job and don't like their life. Like, get divorced, quit your job, and do something new. It's like, great, that sounds fantastic, and that worked out for you, right? And you're making millions and millions of dollars now. Like, what about for the 50 million people who have done that and you know, it didn't work out for them? So I think you got to be careful when you just kind of like broad stroke these things and say like, yeah, that is what we should do. Totally agree, but let's start working on how we can do that. You know, like our training academy is already 8 months long. Like, you know, like, is there room to put jiu-jitsu in there? And then what do you cut, right? And then what do you make the academy longer? Do you make the days longer? So again, I'm all for it, and I think it's necessary, 100% necessary. But I want to work with guys to figure out a way to do it, right? Mm-hmm. To where regular departments from maybe a small town PD all the way up to the Secret Service could do this.
Okay. You start with Secret Service in 2000. Mm-hmm. Where do you start?
Columbus, Ohio. So there's no guarantee you're going to start with your first office, but I was lucky enough that they kept me in Columbus. So start in Columbus and kind of start that deal where you know, I start doing investigations and traveling, doing protection. So a lot of the investigations I did were counterfeit money back then. So you know, we probably had some similar experiences out on the street. You know, so I was a you know, we'd set up counterfeit deals and get an informant and, you know, go buy a sample, you know, of a couple bills and bring them back to the office, and then try to set up bigger deals and do, you know, buy busts out on the street. So you know, was doing that for a couple years and just, you know, had a lot of fun, learned a lot, right? You learned a lot, and you know, kind of not always to judge books by its cover, and you know, doing that kind of street work really, I thought it helped my protection tremendously, because you're interacting with all different kinds of people, and I got a story to tell about that when we get to a certain point in my career. So you know, so I spent 3 years in Columbus, and then I remember my boss came to me and he said, hey, we're force transferring people, New York, LA, or Washington field office. Where do you want to go? I was like, well, I mean, I really don't want to go to any of them, right? And he's like, well, pick one. You got to let me know by the end of the day. And I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm like, you know, I was married to my ex-wife at the time. I'm like, what do you think? And we were kind of like, how about LA? You know, so I was like, all right, well, I said, I'll go to LA. He goes, never mind, they're not taking people. You know, he goes, we saved you. So then like a couple weeks go by, and like we have a tactical team, our counter assault team, you know, which is kind of like our SWAT team for the president. You know, and I wanted to do that. That's what my cousin had done, and that's really what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to do that?
I just liked the action aspect of it. I liked the guys that I interacted with doing protection as a phase one, all, you know, were cool guys, like my kind of guys, right? And so I kind of wanted to, you know, I felt like, and I'm not saying I could have passed, and I wound up never doing it, and I'll explain why, but I would have liked I shouldn't say I wanted to do it. I wanted the opportunity to try to do it, because I don't want to disparage the guys that went through and were able to accomplish that and pass the training. They deserve the credit. I don't want to say I wanted to do it. I wanted the opportunity to try to do it, to try out and do it. So my boss was like, hey, you know, now you're thinking career-wise, like, what would you like to do? And I'm like, well, I think I'd like to, you know, try out for the CAT team. He's like, oh, great. And so he says, okay, well, let's see about the tryouts. And I want to say my grade was, I was like a GS-11 at the time. So he's like, hey, you can't go as a GS-11. He goes, so you got to wait a little bit. And the rules have changed several times in the past 25 years. So I'm still in Columbus, and then he comes to me again. He goes, hey, okay, here's the deal. Force transfers again. Do you want to go to the president's detail? Do you want to go to the intelligence division, or do you want to go to like, I forget the ISD. It's like investigative support division. We don't even have that division anymore. But it's like you're like running license plates on a duty desk and stuff. I'm like, well, I definitely don't want to do that, right? If anybody's watching it, they did it. It's a great career choice, but not for me. So I was like, I want to go to the president's detail. He goes, great. Calls me back and goes, hey, you're only GS-12 now. I can't go to the president's detail. He goes, I go, I'm not going to those other two places, boss. Come on, you got to try to find something else for me. So then he makes some calls, and I go, what about CAT? He goes, no. He goes, it's just not on the table right now. And he goes, okay. So he goes, the best he goes, you could do that investigative support division, you could do the intelligence division, or you could go to the training academy and be an instructor. And I go, well, I'll do that all day long. I'd rather do that. Like, I like training. I have a physical background. So I went to the training academy. So now you can see that phase one, phase two, phase three, that's now been derailed. Yeah. So I go to the training academy.
Okay, let me ask you a question before you start talking about that. Secret Service Academy, we talked offline about this, but I have always been super impressed, and I've always heard Secret Service, Border Patrol, and then you mentioned Air Marshals. Why do you think those agencies in particular, because you're a firearms instructor.
Yes, sir.
Why do you think those agencies put out or make good, firearms training, good marksmen?
Well, so with us, it's, again, if you think of the mission, if God forbid you had to start letting them fly, like, you better be accurate, right? I mean, you're generally going to be in a crowd, of people that are innocent civilians, right? And you have to be discerning and discretion. So, we have really, really good instructors. They're full-time firearms instructors. Like, for instance, I'm a firearms instructor, but I'm a field firearms instructor. Right. It's like an ancillary duty. Sure. In the academy, we have full-time, a firearms staff of full-time instructors, and that's all these guys are on the range, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it's just a lot of firearms training when you're in the academy. It's a lot of shooting. It's a lot of shooting on small targets. It's a lot of shooting under, compressed time. And, we start out in the secrets, so not to give away training secrets, but we start out on a bullseye course. Just a dinner plate size bullseye course, old bullseye course. And you need to make a certain amount of points to move on in your firearms training. That's the first thing you start. I think they call it SQC, Standard Qualification Course. I don't know if they still do it or not, but I mean that, like I wasn't stressed out about the physical stuff, but the first time I shot that course, I was like, man, I go, it's challenging. You know, when you start compressing that time and you're at a certain yardage and you have to put rounds, you know, and you're young, right? Like you're not, you know, this isn't someone that's been shooting for years and years and years, you know? And so, you know, I think, you know, maybe that has something to do with it, but you know, I could try to maybe get you with one of the firearms instructors, one of my friends over there, and they could probably talk to you about this more. So I taught control tactics there. So, and canine, and I can get into how I got into that in a minute. But so control tactics is like defensive tactics or modern combatives now what they teach. And so, you know, we would teach every special agent trainee, every uniformed division recruit, and then we'd also train the protective details would come out to training, you know, for their training cycle. So you know, when you're on the details, you're working, and then you have a training cycle, and you come out and train, you know, shift formations and firearms and control tactics and these things. So, you know, it was a great opportunity at a very kind of young age on the job to interact with people you wouldn't normally get exposure to. Like for instance, you know, if the president's detail comes out for the training, like the SAC of PPD, the agent in charge of PPD's out there, right? You might be the instructor that day, you know, teaching his control tactics. So, you know, you just try to put your best foot forward and present a very professional product, and you know, you start building your reputation that way. Yeah. You've also got the young recruits, right? And so you see everything. I mean, you see things from people that had no business, you know, ever, you know, pursuing a career to badge and gun to people that are just, you know, men and women that are just absolute studs, right? And most of them are like that. You know, the Secret Service does a really good job in the hiring process of making sure we get people that deserve to be here, right? Yeah. So obviously, you know, with anything, people could slip through the cracks, but for the most part, you know, we get a pretty good quality of applicant, and you know, so being out there at the academy, I still wanted to go to the counter assault team, right? So, but I had a time commitment at the academy. I think it was a 3-year commitment.
But are you primarily, when you're instructor there, are you primarily dealing with the uniform division, or are you dealing with everybody?
Everybody.
Okay.
Both. So again, you're dealing with uniform division recruits, you're dealing with special agent recruits, and you're dealing with current agents coming back through for you know, like continuing education training. Can you talk about the difference between the special agents and the uniform division? Yep, sure, yeah. So great question. Two completely different careers, but in the same organization. So the special agent is what I am, and that's kind of the career track, the phase 1, 2, 3 I described to you before doing the protection, and we're non-uniformed. We also have a uniformed division of the Secret Service that are federal police officers. So those are all based in Washington, D.C. Their primary function is for protection of the White House grounds. So if you go to visit the White House, you see the gentlemen and ladies out there in uniform. That's our uniform division officers, right? They have some other missions too. They protect foreign missions as well in Washington, D.C. So you know, the ambassador's residence, embassies and things like that. The uniform division patrols those areas. They also have some special teams. So the uniform division has all of our canine assets. Those are all uniform division officers that have that manage our canine. They have our emergency response team, which is similar to the counter assault team, but dedicated to the White House. That's uniform division, and then our counter sniper team. That are in D.C., but then they also travel and support the president. Those are all uniform division officers. And that progresses in rank very similar to a standard police department. You know, they have sergeants, lieutenants, majors, corporals. So that's interesting. The counter sniper group I always thought were special agents, so that's part of the uniform division. Yes, sir. Uniform division. Wow. Yep. Okay. Okay, yep. So when you've mentioned this a couple times now, so when you're back there as instructor, you start dealing with canines. How'd you fall into that? So I had a background in canine from when I was with the police department. Not a huge, you know, not like a huge background in it. And I worked with a guy who owns a kennel out in Ohio. He was a sheriff's deputy. He retired and he opened his own canine training facility in kennel. So I had like a side job working with him. So we have a pretty big canine program, and we have detection dogs, but then we also have tactical dogs that the emergency response team uses. So when the Gulf War spun back up again, I was in the training academy, and several of our instructors on the tactical side got called back up. So we had a deficit of instructors. So I had been friendly with those guys because I had gone over there, and I had a dog that I had done some training and stuff with, and I just gone over there because I like canine. It's just an aspect of law enforcement I've always enjoyed, and I like dogs, and so I knew those guys. So they were like, hey, is there any way that we could get you to come over here and help with some of the training? So my boss worked out a deal with the head of that section to move me over into the special operations section and work in that canine training center. So Niles, it was the best job I've ever had. I played with dogs all day. I was a GS-13, making my leap, and no one kind of knew what we were doing because the program was very new, very new. We had a small amount of dogs. That program's grown tremendously now, but you can see some of the pictures I have up. Or I think we didn't have that many dogs and handlers at the time. I think when I started, I can't say how many we have now, but I think when I started there was like 5. So super tight-knit group. It was weird being an agent and, these uniform division guys, because there's a little of that, right? We're like, what's this agent doing over here? But I think, just one of my core leadership principles, man, I tell my kids this all the time, is like, I've never been the best at anything. I am like a regular person. I don't have any special skills. I'm not super smart. I'm not, super athletic, but I've always been able to develop a little bit of ability, and I've always had a really positive attitude to try to make it so that people wanted to be around and work with me, right? And I think if you can display those two things, start with those two things, you could be very, very successful in the Secret Service, or I would argue in any organization. So what happened was I just showed up and put the suit on and let their dogs bite me, and they saw I had a little bit of an ability to train a dog, and I had a really positive attitude to try to help their team get better. And I was really transparent about the fact I didn't have any ulterior motives other than just to work with dogs and do something different and help this team grow. And I liked the kennel master very much. He was a really good guy, and we'd become friends, and I wanted to help him build the program. And again, it's not like, oh, we got Joe Scargill, a police canine wizard, and now this thing's going to be great. But no, I had a little bit of ability. I knew my way around police dogs. I wasn't afraid to get bit, and knew how to handle hard dogs. And two, I had a positive attitude where I wanted to work with those guys and help them. So it was a really great experience. I still talk to some of those guys. A couple have come over to the agent side now, and we've maintained a friendship. For this was in 2005, so. 20 years, and that program has just grown and grown and grown, and it's huge. And I still, every time I see those guys, those dogs, I love it. I smile, and it's funny. One of the best compliments I got in the last 5 years was I was out at the Republican National Convention last summer. I'd been detailed up there, and I could talk more in depth about that when we get to that point. But anyway, they had an emergency response teams that they had deployed out there to work at the venue site, and one of the operators and a handler were there, and I didn't recognize them, because I'm old and these guys are young and fit, and I was like, and I started talking to him. I'm like, yeah, I said, you probably never believe me, but it really, because I'm in a suit, I'm a SAC. A really long time ago, I was in the ERT, canine training section. And he's like, oh, what's your name? And I told him my name. He's like, yeah, I've heard of you, and I was like, oh my God, man, it like warmed my heart, It's kind of like the old guy coming back for his 25th anniversary. He was the all-city quarterback, and now he's fat and bald, and somebody sees him at the bar. It's like, hey, weren't you the guy that threw 4 touchdowns in 1989
Al
in the
Bundy.
city? Yeah, right, exactly. So. It was just cool, man. That I at least left a little bit of an positive impact on that program. Yeah. I love those guys. Again, I love that program. So, it was just a great opportunity for me to kind of, again, like I said, I kind of got off the road and did that. So
So audience, if you go back, and I don't know what episode it is, but there's another interview with Richard LaTulip, who's another Secret Service guy who had a very interesting career and is kind of transitioning into what we're going to talk about now. But in 2007, you basically got stationed in Bulgaria. How do you get there?
I wanted to go to Rome, and I applied to go to Rome when I was in my first phase of my office, got denied. Applied right when I got to training, got denied. I want to say, okay, so then I applied, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 times. But anyway, I applied to go to Rome, but I also wanted to go to the counter assault team, like I had talked about. Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, this opportunity for Rome came up. I actually had some seniority on the job now. Maybe this will work out. So I applied to go to Rome, and I was like, the counter assault team can wait. If I could make it, but my tryout for the counter assault team can wait. If I have an opportunity to go overseas, this is going to be great. And I get a phone call from an agent who's now retired, but he was pretty high up in our organization and wound up really high up in the organization. And I'd known him through my mentor. So it's kind of like, how it is. Like you get into kind of the crime family, right? So I'm now like a junior member of this particular crime family. So the head of that crime family calls, right, and says, hey, I saw you put in for Rome. I said, yes, sir. He's like, it's not going to work out for you. He goes, how does Sofia, Bulgaria sound? And I was like, all right, I'm Googling Bulgaria. I had no clue where this place is. I didn't even know if it was a country, Actually, I knew a little bit about it just from wrestling because they had a good, strong wrestling culture, but, I didn't know where it was on a map. I didn't know if it was part of Russia, So I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. I always wanted to go overseas. It was a smaller office under the Rome district, so maybe this could be a path to Rome for me. And I had this obsession with Rome, so which is a funny story, but maybe not for the podcast. I can tell it if you want.
Sure.
So I took an Italian class in college, and the teacher and I had a romantic relationship, and so I went back to Rome with her for a summer one time in college, and I think it was between my sophomore and junior year. And I told my mom that I was working a wrestling camp. I wasn't going to come home this summer. So unless she watches this shit, this will be the first time she'll ever find out I did that. Anyway.
So what are you doing in Bulgaria?
So I get to Bulgaria. Yep. It is Eastern Europe, brother. I mean, it's old buildings and communist bloc structures and things like that. But we had an office in the embassy, and you had asked me off air about the travel. Even though I was assigned in Bulgaria, I traveled everywhere. The Rome district, kind of like I explained to Jacksonville, the Rome district covered, I think at the time, 54 countries. Sometimes they realign them, but at that time it was 54 countries. So whenever anyone we protected went to one of those countries, we would have to go and do a protective advance.
Wow, that's interesting, because that was the question I had. How many maybe not particular, but you guys got a lot of offices all over the world doing the same exact thing?
Not a lot, but we have them.
Okay.
We have them, but not a lot, right? So like for instance, like the FBI, they have a legat in every embassy, right? Every single embassy. We don't have that. We don't have that posture.
Right.
We have more of a regional concept.
Okay.
I was traveling to places, and I mean, you're talking about a guy that I'd been to Canada and the Bahamas and Rome. That was the extent of my foreign travel. And now I'm in, Istanbul. I'm in Ankara. I'm in Saudi Arabia. I'm in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Tanzania, Uganda, like just these crazy places, Serbia, Montenegro, crazy places. Just having this experience, this is kind of like what I thought the job was when I watched James Bond when I was a little kid. I didn't pull my gun out as much as James Bond did, obviously, but it was just like, you're it, right? Like I would show up in these countries and like I'm the person coordinating this, right? Or me or one other person they'd send from America to meet me. And it was awesome. I mean, you know, but also we have investigative responsibilities, right? So when you're not traveling for protection, you're sometimes traveling to these countries doing investigative work, right?
What kind of investigative work?
Counterfeit.
Same thing. Are you doing at that point? So you're there in 2007 to 2012. Are you still dealing with counterfeit currency, or are you dealing with something else?
So at the time I got there, I want to say Bulgaria was the second leading producer of U.S. counterfeit currency globally.
Wow.
When I got there, Bulgaria was. I think I want to say, and that's changed significantly now.
Why Bulgaria?
Well, I think one, you had, you know, after the fall of communism, the country was in a bit of turmoil. You had people that were highly skilled at jobs like printing and things like that and didn't have jobs anymore. Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, you know, it shares a border with Turkey, and it's kind of a gateway to Central and Western Europe. So it was kind of a good transit point to you could get a distribution network flowing east through Turkey into the Middle East and down into Africa and even Southeast Asia, or you could get a distribution network flowing west through Serbia, Croatia, and into Western Europe. So I think the strategic location was, you know, those two things: people that had, you know, skilled labor to make it, and strategic location to distribute it.
Yeah. Huh. Any interesting cases that you worked on over there?
Yeah. So one case out of Bulgaria. So there was a case of a very high quality. I got to dance around how I describe this.
Okay.
A very high quality counterfeit $100 bill. You could probably Google this and see. And it is believed that this was maybe produced by a foreign country.
Okay.
So state sponsored. So I was in America, or in Bulgaria, and there was a report that in Yemen they had arrested a diplomat from this country for allegedly passing counterfeit money. This person had diplomatic immunity, so they had to let him go when he left. So I would go down to Yemen. I went down to Yemen, to Sana'a, Yemen, by myself, to try to work this investigation. And how this was found, you know, you've got all this advanced detection technology. People have pens, ultraviolet things. He had went to a souk, which is, you know, one of those like kind of open air market, like Arab markets, and had been spending it. And one of the shopkeepers was like, it doesn't feel right. So the shopkeeper like looked down the line of all the different stands and stores and was like, did you? And the other guy's like, yeah, did you? Right. So like just because these guys feel this currency all the time, it's just something wasn't right about it. And you know, you probably know this, but for the listeners, you know, a lot of the countries on that Arabian Peninsula use a dollarized economy because of the oil. You know, they're very used to getting U.S. dollars there. So it's, you know, so that was Yemen's an interesting place to work, man. You know, I had to stay at an FBI agent's house because, you know, the hotels aren't safe to stay in, and so we would kind of, you know, kind of fortify ourselves in these bunker type homes. And I had some individuals from the Department of Justice that were very interested in prosecuting this person, and they, you know, they would kind of, I got to give the both of them credit. You know, I would talk with them all the time to try to further this investigation, and they had all these great ideas. And I go, hey, why don't you guys put your money where your mouth is and meet me in Yemen, and we go talk to the Minister of Interior there. And they were like, all right. At first they weren't, but they did, and so I met these two lawyers from the DOJ in Yemen, and we would go to the Ministry of Interior and we'd talk to them. And I wish I could find this so I have evidence of this story for you, but I have looked and looked for this thing. It's probably in a box in my attic. So We had gone and met with the Minister of Interior, and we kept getting blown off. So we'd sit in a waiting room. He wouldn't see us. We'd wait. We'd go back to the house, the safe house. We'd go back. We'd go back. We'd go back. So we were all scheduled to leave on a flight. And we were getting ready to leave, and we got called back to the Ministry of Interior. That flight, that plane blew up on the runway.
Wow.
And I had my boarding pass, and I don't know what I did with it.
Wow. Man, that's crazy.
So that was probably the craziest, like, that was probably like the craziest, thing as far as like a weird, like super spooky, spy type thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, we did a protective operation in Tripoli, Libya. I mean, I've been in Gaddafi's compound when he was in power with a protectee. It was crazy. I flew into Tripoli and I got detained at the airport for a couple hours. Because Secret Service means something much different in most countries than it does in America. You tell someone you're with the Secret Service in Eastern Europe, like that was the people that made people disappear, right? Like that was the poison umbrella, they'd stab, so.
Oh, so there's a misunderstanding.
There's a huge misunderstanding about what you're doing in that country, right? When they see your credentials that say Secret Service on it, and it's like, so, and then there was a language barrier, so trying to get around that was difficult. But it was insane. Like the embassy, the quote unquote embassy was in a hotel owned by Gaddafi called the Corinthian Hotel. So we just had like 3 or 4 floors in this hotel, and that was the quote unquote embassy. Mm. And the DCM at the time, which the DCM, the Deputy Chief of Mission, was the ambassador that was killed in the Benghazi incident. He was the deputy at the time. Huh. So we had worked with him all week in getting the protection set up.
Let me ask you this. And if you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it. But in the United States, federal agents, we can get on planes. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's procedures. Mm-hmm. Now you're protecting people overseas, and you're not doing it with your fingers. You're clearly. Yeah. How does it work? Does the Secret Service have, I don't know, letters of understanding with each country saying, hey, this is what's going to happen? And more importantly, are you guys overseas allowed to do what you do domestically and fly with guns on planes?
No. So no.
Okay.
Like when I would travel, I would just go through a metal detector like a normal person and then land in the country. Like when I would get to Yemen, the FBI would have his FSNI, his Foreign Service national, pick me up with like a halberd with a gun in it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So he would just give me a gun. I don't know if it was legal to carry it or not at the time, but when we go on these big operations, yes, there's diplomatic notes that are sent, and there's approvals for agent, for the weapons to come over.
Yeah.
And it depends on the country how that all works, but yeah, obviously we have our equipment to do our jobs in those countries. Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah, I mean, so like if I leave the U.S. to go on a foreign mission, I have to leave my equipment home, and I just fly like I would if I was just going on vacation.
Yeah, I just thought about that. I mean, this is really interesting because you're clearly protecting people all over the world, and
So when we launch a mission domestically to go overseas, we fly military.
Okay.
So we fly, this is not James Bond. So when let's say the president, he's in Saudi, he just came back from Saudi Arabia. So we man that mission with agents from America.
Yeah.
So everyone will go to DC. We will take a military flight to Saudi Arabia. So you bring all your equipment on the plane, but this is not, brother, this is not
a
private jet.
I've been on them.
It's a C-17.
Yeah.
So you have, like, if you picture like the hull of this thing, you have all the equipment loaded in, and then the agents are like sitting on the side.
Yeah.
It's you got to wear double ear protection. It's so loud. You want to eat, you got to bring your own food. People have to bring like sleeping bags. You're laying on the floor. So I mean, it's rough, man. It is a rough. It's a rough experience to fly like that.
Yeah, and you're not getting miles on that.
You're not getting miles, and they don't have flight attendants. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do know.
So the agents, man. I mean, the sacrifice some of these agents make. all these agents make, and not just me, but now these younger agents, you got to be pretty tough mentally, to endure that.
Yeah. 2012, you become assistant to the SAC. Now, for those listeners, assistant to the SAC, for like DEA, that's a group supervisor. For FBI, it may be a senior.
Yeah, it's like SSA, supervisory special agent for them.
So essentially, that's a first line supervisor. Is that a promotion for you?
Yes, correct. So again, I'm in Bulgaria. I love the work. I loved being there. I actually met my now wife when I was there, so I extended twice. So it was a 3-year assignment. I did another 1-year extension to 4 years, 1-year extension to 5 years. Okay, so now I'm a non-supervisory agent, and I have to come back to Washington, D.C. And so I had still wanted to do that counter assault team, and I had still wanted to go to the president's detail. But at this point now, I had been on the job so long, I'd kind of I would like kind of be really like not taking a step back in my career, but I would be like going from almost like a phase 3 agent back to the beginning of a phase 2.
Right.
Right. So my agent in charge at the time, he had been in Rome for forever and was just a great guy, really good mentor. And he was like, hey, he goes, why don't you try to get promoted? You've had a really non-traditional career track. He goes, but I think some of the things you've done, like I've been in Gaza City too with the late President Jimmy Carter. Like I was the field office lead for a mission to go into Gaza in 2011.
So how?
2012.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how is that? I mean,
Scary.
yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you guys are responsible for protection of these guys, but you guys are going, I mean, I can't even imagine going into a situation like that. And without going into details, but how much preparation must go in?
A lot. So what's funny is I not only going in there with him on game day, but you have to do the advance, right? So I went there. I went there once myself, and then once me and another agent into Gaza City to the host country's headquarters with nothing, no gun, no nothing, and met with them and arranged, the security, and that's a lot of soft skills. I remember, when we were crossing the border from Israel to go into Gaza, we used a United Nations vehicle to go. The Israeli border guard was like, how come, he's like, are you guys armed? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you guys are crazy. And I'm like, well, here was my theory on that, right? I could have brought a missile launcher and it wouldn't have helped me if they wanted to hurt me. Right. But if I had a pistol on, that would highly insult that host, right? Whether I agree with what they do, whether I don't, it doesn't matter. Like I had a job I needed to get done. So my theory on this was there's nothing I can bring that's going to help me, right? I'm in the middle of Gaza. Like, no amount of rounds is going to get me out of there, right? But if I upset who I'm there seeing and need their help, which is what I needed, to make sure that I could get the late president in and out of there safely, then that would be bad too, right? Because now instead of overcoming all the other things I would need to overcome, I didn't even overcome why I brought a gun into their house, right? So I just made a decision that I felt like that it was going to be better for me personally from a personal safety standpoint to not have one, and better for me from a goodwill standpoint, to show those hosts that, hey, look, I trust you, right? Like. You need to make sure, you need to guarantee my safety and the safety of our team and the president when he comes here, right? Yeah. And so that wound up working out for us, right? But I mean, just crazy, dude. I mean, like stuff I never thought in a million years I'd be doing as a Secret Service agent, So anyway, you had asked about the promotion. So
yeah, so it's not one of those things where you go, hey, I want to get. It's kind of you're falling into it, right?
The missions or the promotion?
No, the promotion.
Oh, okay. So no. So the way it works in the Secret Service is there's vacancies, right?
Yeah.
Like in any organization, let's say you work for Apple. Like
no. My point was you didn't going into the Secret Service going, hey, I want to be a supervisor one day. So this is just kind of.
I wanted to protect the president.
Right.
Yeah. No. I never. That was never on my radar until that agent in charge that I had there had said that to me. I thought there was no way, right? Because I hadn't done a permanent protection assignment at that point, and it was like, it was one of those things. So he's like, look, I could get you to try out a CAT, I could get you to PPD. He goes, presidency, but I think I could get you promoted. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, when the promotion list comes out, bid on every single. Do you care where you go? And I'm like, hey sir, I go, if they colonize the moon, I will staff the lunar field office. Like I said, it doesn't matter to me,
right.
Where I go. Like I didn't really have a home. Like I left DC to go overseas. I sold my house. I really didn't, care about going back to Ohio. I didn't want to go back to Pennsylvania. So to me, it didn't matter. And I met my wife in Bulgaria. She had never been to the States, lived there. So, she didn't really know anything. Luckily,
that makes it easy.
So that gets me to the story. So I bid on every single assignment on the list, every single promotion assignment, everything, and I ranked them all in order. And the last one, I think this was a list where they had, because of like a government shutdown or something, they had a promotion list, they had canceled it, so then they had reissued a list with it was like 2 vacancy lists combined, so it was huge. There was tons and tons of spots, which was lucky for me, right? Because I probably wouldn't have worked if it wasn't that way. So remember, you don't have to be great. You just have to have a little bit of skill and a positive attitude. So I bid on everything on that assignment. And he calls me and he's like, hey, I got good news and bad news for you. I'm like, well, what's the good news? He's like, the good news is you got promoted. He's like, the bad news is you're going to Detroit, Michigan. And so I'm like, okay. Well, what happened? I had done, when I was in Columbus, Ohio, the polygrapher that would come in to the office to polygraph our new applicants was now the SAC, the agent in charge of Detroit. And I had also done a temporary assignment on the vice president's detail. I think it was like a 3-week temporary assignment on the vice president's detail, and he was on the vice president's detail at the time as a supervisor. And so I had worked with him a little bit, and for whatever reason he liked me. So this list goes, and again, and people are like, Scargill didn't do protection, and it gets to this guy who was the agent in charge in Detroit, and he's like, oh, I know this guy. He was a young agent when I used to come to Columbus, and he did a temp for 3 weeks on the, he's like, he was getting a little pressure, I think, but he's like, okay, I'll take him, and so that's how that worked out for me. So I go to Detroit, and I'm the group supervisor, for your terms, but the assistant to the special agent in charge of the counterfeit division. And Detroit is just a crazy place to work. You know what I mean? And it's I mean, we were out a lot at night, and it was like the 1980s style Miami Vice, Live and Die in LA. I mean, just the crime there, and the group of guys we had. It was great. We had a big squad, but I mean, we were hitting houses multiple times a week, doing search warrants, and pretty big counterfeit investigations. Credit card stuff was starting to get a lot more prevalent, so we would get some of that. A lot of the gangs would start doing that. They would kind of fund some of the drug trade and some of the weapons with credit card stuff, because they knew they wouldn't get the time they would on a weapons charge, right? So. And they would also launder money that way. So a lot of those cases there in Detroit. But now I knew, I wasn't going to live in Detroit forever. So, my wife and I had kids. I have twin boys, so they were born in Michigan, and then I bid on another bunch of assignments, and this was more, even though it was an ASAC position, it was a lateral. I went to George Bush 41 detail, but kind of similar with my career. I bid on, so I needed to do protection, right? I knew I never get to a position like I'm in now, because I'm in a management track, but if you don't do protection, you're done. You know what I mean? So so I bid on every single protection assignment on a list when I was eligible, you know, from the president's detail down to all the former details. Because again, my boss gave me the same advice. He goes, hey, we need to get your protection so that you could further your career now. You're in management. Bid on every protection assignment and let's see where it goes. Like, you know, so I bid on every one, ranked them all, first to last. The last one I wanted was, you know, the late President Bush 41's detail, because he was just at an age where he just wasn't doing much anymore, right? And it was. I wanted to go and I wanted to get some credibility because I had to overcome that, right? I mean that's a stigma in our agency that you know I needed to overcome. So I wanted to go and do protection, real protection, right? So that I could kind of level, get myself on par with where other people that had a more traditional career track were.
Right.
And let me just say this. Now in 2025, you could never do this career track like I did. There's just no way this would ever happen, right? There's just the progression is in place now that you would never have been able to do this. So whether I was lucky to be able to do this, or whether it was just the way things worked out, or if other people kind of did a career track like this, I don't know. You hear rumors of other people that have done it, but you know, this wasn't by design. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just kind of the way things went, and you know, I actually was able to progress my career by taking assignments other people didn't want, right? Like no one wanted to go to Detroit, you know, and no one wanted to go to Bush, to Senior Bush's detail, because again, not because of the man or what it represented, right? Obviously, you know, a national hero and a treasure, but because it was just the pace of it, right? Like if you went to that detail, you went because you really didn't want to work too hard, or you had family issue where you didn't want to be on the road all the time, right? Or there was a lifestyle choice there. So that's not what I wanted. Like I wanted to go and do real work. So, you know, I bid on all the assignments. I get a call from my boss, and he goes, "Hey, congratulations! You're going to go to Bush Jr., Bush 43." He had just gotten out of office, and so I was like, "Oh, fantastic!" He goes, "Congrats!" So the night, you know, you get the call the night before. The next day, it comes out on paper, Bush 41.
Okay.
No one says a word to me.
Okay, so Bush 41. You're in Houston.
Yep.
How old is Bush 41 at this point?
He's 90.
Oh, so
Yeah.
he's old.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a
Yeah.
question for I've got multiple questions for you
Sure,
about
yeah.
protection stuff. So he's 91 years old. He's former CIA. I mean, this guy is one of the most qualified in terms of government, everything else.
Yeah.
But realistically, what's the danger to him at this point? And I look, I get it.
Yeah.
Secret Service, you got to protect these former presidents and stuff. But as you get older on as a president, do you run the risk of like people that just don't like him domestically, or is there a realistic threats against him from foreign governments?
Well, I think there's always a threat, right? When you've been the president of the most powerful country in the world, right? There's always a threat, and remember, he was a wartime president too.
Yeah.
So you know, you know, was there an active and real threat from a host country towards him when I was there? I think now that he's deceased, I could probably talk about this and not get in trouble. No, there wasn't, right? But you know, like, what if there's a really angry person whose son was killed, you know, because of an order he gave his president, right? Or something, you know. So you don't know what you don't know. Like we always say, you know, how many assassination attempts have we not prevented in the Secret Service, right? So you know, President Kennedy, President Reagan, and President Trump. You know, how many have we prevented? You have no clue, right? Probably thousands, right? But how many have we prevented? You'll never know that, right? Because how many people showed up and changed their mind, or saw the security profile of the Secret Service and said, "I don't want this," or you know, for whatever reason, didn't do it, right? So you can't do protection based purely on, is there an active, credible, and real threat right now? Because the answer to that question is we don't know. Right? We don't know. You know, is there an active, credible, real threat? We don't know. But is there is there a potential for a threat? Yes, anytime we leave the house, right? And so like, and again, you know, a lot of the subjects that we deal with that have these threatening behaviors or unusual direction of interest towards the president, they're mentally ill, right? And so who knows what they think the late President Bush did to them or their family, or put them in a situation of economic poverty, or took their house from them when he was president. You know, you don't know. So, you know, you still have to take it seriously. Obviously, the protective profile is different than that of the sitting president, and the further you get removed. But no, I mean, we did protection for real there. He just didn't do a lot because of his advanced age. So it was more of a mundane assignment. But that's a leadership challenge in and of itself, right? Because you got to keep guys sharp and ready.
Yeah. But one question I have for you before I forget: if you are a son or daughter of a president, I think he said you're mandated to protect them up until 18.
18. Yep.
Or
executive order, I guess, potentially the sitting president.
But I guess if you're under 18, it's not like that child can go, leave me alone. You guys can't. I don't want you around. They're gonna get guarded no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, I remember having this conversation with Mr. Kennedy. Protection is very invasive.
Yeah.
Very invasive. You know, you're going to go from living your life, or if you had security, maybe a driver, you know, to, you know, marked police units and vehicle checkpoints by your house, and, you know, explosive detection dogs at your house, and, you know, you're going to open your back curtains and there's going to be an agent standing in your backyard, right? He's not going to be looking in your house, but he's going to be there, right? You're going to have camera systems. You know, all your visitors are going to have to be approved before they can come. You know, so it's a very invasive process to your privacy and to your personal life and to your family, right? And you know, I always approached it that I didn't take that lightly on just how invasive that is, right? And I could only imagine how I would react if I had that kind of, those eyes kind of on and around me all the time, right? And you know, it's like heavy is the head that wears the crown. That's the answer you get from most people. It's like, oh, they sign up for that. Sure, they do, but I think, you know, what you think it is and what it is are two different things. You know, and we've all made assumptions on how something would be, and then when reality sets in, it's like, holy mackerel, man, this is a lot. So
okay, so I've got a lot of questions for you now. So
yeah, sure.
One thing that I really admire about the Secret Service is there's very rarely, I've read several books from former Secret Service guys that have protected presidents, and there is, I can't think of any situation where I've heard that president was a piece of crap and that person, you know, and you guys are very very low key. You're not sharing secrets.
Yeah.
So with that being said, in what you were saying, heavy is the person who wears the crown and everything else, I've heard really good things about the Bushes. Any situation where, like, there was one story that I heard where Secret Service guy is outside in the cold and, you know, basically Barber goes, hey, bring him a hat, and, you know, one of those things. Any situations with the Bushes? Because I can really see them. On the one hand, it's like, look, yeah, you're in that situation, but it's also, I've got to be really appreciative of these guys that are putting their life for me.
Yeah.
I mean, any situations with the Bushes in particular, even though they were pretty advanced age at that point?
So I'm going to give you the best non-answer you've ever heard.
Okay, perfect.
So I would never talk about good or bad interactions I had, especially while I'm on the job, but even in retirement.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you why. Because this, if I say something, oh, the Bushes were great and I've had all these great experiences, then, you know, it could be assumed that maybe I didn't have such great experiences with other people, right? And then that diminishes that. Like, I've had great experience. I like all our presidents. I like all our former presidents. I've had great experiences on this job. And if I was to say something salacious, because we have had people that have kind of said something positive or negative.
Yeah.
That would get people to listen momentarily. But I look at it like this. I think if you really thought about it and you're a decent person, like, you'd be like, man, this guy, like, we pay his salary. He's supposed to protect these people, and he's on this podcast, you know, talking about this stuff, about what he said. Like, why would that guy do that, man? You know, so I try to protect not only the integrity of the folks I protected by being close-lipped about that, but also I want to protect the integrity of the Secret Service by being close-lipped about that, because I don't ever, even if I say something good, I don't want it to be assumed that we're not there for that, right? I'm not there to evaluate whether it's a good person, bad person, they're having a good day, bad day. I'm there for their personal safety.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always looked at it. You know, on a personal level, you know, obviously you relate to certain people, and you other people you don't. But you've got to turn that part of your brain off when you're doing this job, man, or you're not going to be successful.
Yeah. So is it hard to not develop a personal relationship with the people that you're seeing every single day? Just, hey, we got to be standoffish. We've got to, and not standoffish, but hey, we're just going to do our job.
So I learned it when I was a baby agent. So I had a great boss, and you know, when I was in Columbus, and we were at an event at a very, very high net worth individual's house, billionaire in Columbus, with a protectee, and we're in this person's house, and it is a, you know, beautiful home, prepared dinner, staff, and we're standing there, and you know, you know, you talk to this person, you talk to that person, guests are like, oh, hi, you know, because they don't meet Secret Service agents every day. I remember he came up and elbowed me, you know, gave me a little bit, he goes, hey, don't ever forget you're the hired help. And that's always stuck with me, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, of course, if someone speaks to me when I'm doing protection, I'm going to be cordial, I'm going to be professional. If they ask about my family, I'll talk to them. But you can never forget that you're there to protect them, and that's your job.
Yeah.
Your job isn't to be their buddy. And quite frankly, they're running the most powerful country in the world. They don't have time to be your buddy. You know what I mean?
So it's not like guarding tests.
Yeah, I've never seen that, believe it or not. But
It was a pretty good movie.
yeah.
I kind of like that.
All right. I mean, like you know, again, I just feel like, of course, the more you work with someone, you develop a personal friendship with them, a relationship. I wouldn't say friendship, but a relationship, and a cordial friendship. But you know, like, you're busy, man, on this job. You know what I mean? Like, it's you don't have a lot of time to sit around and be talking, and they're running from event to event to event, whether they're raising funds or having meetings or doing this. Like, you know, there's time in the car, obviously, you know, for a little bit more personal banter, but that's kind of it.
Is there really personal banter though?
Not much.
Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
You know, hi, how are you? Great. How was your day? Oh, you're new. You know, where are you from?
Okay,
great. And then they're back doing what they're doing, and you're back on the radio doing what you're doing.
Right. Okay, 2015, 2017, you're the ASAC, so you get promoted, and you're you're in Houston, you're responsible for the bushes, and then in 2017 to 2022, you get promoted, and you're the special agent in charge of Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
Yep.
So,
a couple pay grades higher than I ever should have been, but you know, again,
fair enough.
I made a career of taking assignments people didn't want, right?
Yeah.
So like Minnesota, not a garden spot. Weather's terrible. Tough place to do business as a law enforcement officer. And I go, I'll go. And I should have checked my wife on this one first because she hated it there. But you know, so yeah. So anyway, I wind up in Minnesota. And so again, the regional concept, we have the state of the Minneapolis field office, which is, you know, downtown Minneapolis, covers Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota.
Yeah.
And then we had a satellite office in each of the Dakotas.
So you're there for COVID and George Floyd. How is that?
I am there for COVID and George Floyd. So which one you want first?
COVID first.
Okay, COVID first. So you know, COVID hits, no one knows what's going on, right? Like, you know, it started out, everyone thinks they're going to die, you know, if they touch a package that got mailed to you. And you know, Minnesota is a very progressive state. So their COVID lockdown rules were on the more stringent end of things. But you know, we had exemptions because of what we did, and you know, you can't be a Secret Service agent from home. So we were kind of in a battle-ready state. Took some precautions, but we were locked down like everyone else. So I would hold, you know, not daily, but kind of every other day, you know, I'd have a Teams meeting and talk to my whole staff and just make sure everybody's good, nobody's sick. And so what we did is I kind of just platooned people into work. So I'd have like a, you know, red, blue, green, and gold team, and I'm like, okay, you guys all stay together. Don't talk to anybody else, but this way we'll always have people that are technically healthy staying at home. So one of the things I did, not really Secret Service related, but leadership wise, was, you know, guys get sick of listening to the same voice, man. You know, and gals, you know, I should say. So, you know, I've been able to meet just some extraordinary people in my life, and because of this job, you know, they kind of assumed I was at a higher class in society than I was, right? So you know, I was able to befriend some pretty famous people, some pretty well-known people. So I reached out to my contact list, and I'm like, hey, you know, like, would you guys mind if almost we did like kind of podcast format, like you just could come on to our weekly Teams meeting with my office and just talk to them about whatever you want to talk to them about, whether it's leadership, whether it's society, whether it's the sport you played. And so I had just some awesome people on. Like, so I had the former Surgeon General in Minnesota was a contact of mine. She came on and kind of talked about the virus and stuff. But then, you know, I don't know if you follow MMA, but Randy Couture is a very close personal friend of mine. He's Uncle Randy to my kids.
Wow.
You know, I've known him forever. So I had him come on, talk to my office about, you know, endurance and perseverance and leadership.
How'd you meet him? Was it through
the wrestling community?
Yeah. Okay.
And then when I was in Bulgaria, he was filming a movie over there, and he was close with another agent on the job who was also a wrestler. So the agent on the job that was a wrestler was like, you know, was in touch with Randy. He's like, hey, you should reach out to Joe. You've met him before. You know, he lives there in Bulgaria. He could take you around. So he reached out to me, and I was like, hell yeah. And so I would pick up, and we just build a friendship off of that. And,
cool.
You know, this isn't a podcast about him, but I feel like I gotta give him the credit. That guy is one of, if not my closest friend. He has never missed one of my kids' birthdays, no matter where I've lived in the world. He flies to my house. This guy, who's, you know, an A-list famous guy, flies to where I live to celebrate my kid's birthday.
Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, that's cool.
Every year for 10 years, he's never missed.
Wow. Wow.
I've lived in Minnesota, Detroit, Houston, Florida. He'll make time in his schedule and come to see them.
Which is actually really cool to hear, because you hear other celebrities that wouldn't even bother giving you the time of day, let alone.
Every year.
Wow.
Every year.
Yeah.
And my kids have no clue. Like, they're starting to understand now, but they have no, you know, they don't understand the magnitude of his fame. You know, especially in the sport because my boys wrestle too. You know, in the sport they're competing in, like he's.
Yeah.
I mean, like when he came the last time, like they had their school field day. It's like their little Olympic event. He came. He's like, dude, I want to go. And so we, like, me and their grandmom and Randy Couture standing there watching him do the three-legged race at the elementary school. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So that's how I met him. And but anyway, I had him speak. I had like a lot of guys, and I like to play sometimes too, you know, the Call of Duty video game. So I know the actor that did all the motion capture for the main character in that. So I had him come on and talk about the video game process and how they made the game and give the guys tips when they're playing. And like, you could play his character, and the guys like have it. Like, they're like, dude, this is a skin we play when we're, you know, so that was cool. My cousin is a surgeon, and he was the president of the Florida Medical Board at the time. So he came on and talked. I was doing some coaching at the University of Minnesota for their Greco-Roman team, and so I had the head coach of the men's varsity team come on. I mean, he's, you know, world silver medalist, like pretty good motivational speaker. He talked. You know, it was just a variety of different people. You know, most of my like people that are really good are in the wrestling community, just because that's what I did. But I had another guy come on. He was a former chief of police, friend of mine. He talked about you know, stuff like that. So you know, we made it through. We had the president did a 4th of July visit to Mount Rushmore when I was there, so that was a pretty good event. You know, under the COVID restrictions, and we made that work. So it was good. No one got deathly ill on my team. You know, a couple people got it. I think more people got sick. want to say somebody got really sick from the vaccine, but not hospitalized or anything. But you know, we were pretty lucky.
Yeah. Let me ask you this before we start talking about the George Floyd stuff. You know, you never really wanted to be a supervisor. Is my
It's
impression.
not that I didn't want to be. It just was never on my radar.
Yeah, it wasn't. But I talk to some people and I go, hey, did you ever want to be a SAC? Yep, I wanted to be a SAC from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But that wasn't you. So with that being said, I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership. So you're bringing in all these people to talk to your guys and everything else, and I think that's kind of thinking outside the box. Where do you think your leadership style comes from?
I created my entire leadership framework from stuff I learned in the Secret Service, but developed it coaching kids wrestling. And I could tell you the story how.
Okay, go ahead.
Did you have a question first?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I did. And maybe this will interweave what you're talking about. Do you think leadership is innate or learned?
Both.
Okay.
I think you have to have you have to have a passion for it. So I think you need to have a passion for leadership, and that passion needs to be selfless, right? So if you're leading, by definition, it can't be for you. It's got to be for the people you're leading.
Okay.
Okay. So if you don't have that, then anything else you do is going to be lipstick on a pig. And people, you know, Secret Service agents, DEA agents, even kids, they're pretty smart, man. They can see through fake leadership. So, but anyone that just says, hey, I'm a natural leader and I've never practiced being a leader, well, that's not good either, right? So I think you've got to, I think you need both. I mean, I think you need a little bit of natural ability, but you need a really positive attitude to want to develop those skills and be an effective leader.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I'm leading offices, right? I'm not leading an entire organization, and I'm not leading, you know, big companies, right? So take what I say with a grain of salt, but this is my opinion on it. Yeah. The two kind of the two heartbeats for this are, again, a little bit of ability and a positive attitude to want people want to work with you, people want to gravitate towards you. Right. So how did I develop this leadership framework that's got kind of three pillars to it? I'll tell you right now. So, I you know, like any good parent, I was a wrestler, like we talked about. So I took my young kids and forced them into a sport at a ridiculously young age that I did, right, to get them involved in wrestling, so that they'll hate my guts when they turn 13. So I bring them to this local wrestling club in Minnesota, where we're living, and I had also done some coaching at the university, and it's a weird story how I got into that too. But anyway, so I am not trying to make this out to be like, oh my God, Joe's here. So it wasn't like that at all. But people in the wrestling community in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, kind of knew who I was because I was down helping out at the university with the regional training center. So again, I don't want to set the picture like I'm some like person that they were waiting. So anyway, I take my kids to this wrestling club, and they get out on the mats, right? And there's two big mat areas going, right? And there's one with older kids that were kind of like middle school, maybe getting closer to high school age, you know, and those kids were doing pretty good. They were wrestling, and they were, you know, you could tell that there was some organization there. Then there was another mat that had like kindergarten to third graders or fourth graders on it, right? And that's where my kids were, and that wasn't going so well, right? There's kids picking their nose and, you know, taking shoes off and crying, and you know, and so the owner of the club, who's the head coach, comes over to me, and he's like, hey, you know, Joe, he's like, you know, shakes my hand. He's like, I know who you are. He's like, would you mind giving me a little bit of help? Would you mind stepping on the mat and helping out? And I was like, yeah, sure, with the big kids. And he was like, no. He's like, over here. And I'm like, oh shit. But I'm like, you know what? Like, my kids are on that mat, right? So I have a kind of a selfish investment into this, seeing this go well. So, you know, I call them all in, you know, get the coach. I'm like, hey, let's try to get this a little. So I call these kids in, right? And I'm like, all right, everybody sit down, crisscross applesauce, right? I heard my kids say this, and so they all sit there. They all knew it, right? I'm like, all right. So step one, boom. And I'm like, hey, you guys need 3 things to be good at wrestling, okay? 3 things. That's it. I'm like, anybody know what they are? No one knows, right? So I said, okay, number one, you got to listen to your coaches with your whole body. I heard my kids say this. I think they learned it from their kindergarten teacher. Dude, this is genius, right? Because it's not just open your ears and be screwing around on your phone, for professional, not screwing around on your phone or typing in. I do this all the time. I violate my own rule, but it's like, no, listen, look, make eye contact, calm your body down, pay attention, right? Listen to what someone has to say. So listen with your whole body, try your best, which this was a huge mistake, and I'm going to tell you why in a second, and have fun. That's it. That's all we got to do. Guys ready? They're like, yep, 1, 2, 3, boom. So the kids go out, and we start running them through the practice, and they're doing stuff, right? And I'm like, man, I cannot believe that this worked. So they're doing the stuff. But what would happen was, anytime we asked them to do something hard, they would just stop, right? So like, whether it was push-ups or a move that they couldn't get, and I'd go over and I'd be like, buddy, you were doing so good, man. Why'd you stop? He's like, I tried my best. And I'm like, But see, to a kid, he tried his best, right? Because as adults, like, we know, like, you push through when it gets sore. One more rep, couple more minutes, 1 more hour doing it, right? But as a kid, you haven't learned that yet, right? So as a kid, like, I tried, it's hard, boom, I sit down. So that was on me as a leader, not on him as a follower, right? So I call them all back in. Like, hey, everybody's doing good. I go, Coach made a mistake. I need to change one thing. So we're going to listen with our whole body. We're going to do our best, not try. When you get to try and it gets hard, say, there's one more I can do, and it's do. And then we're going to have fun. You're ready? 1, 2, boom. And so now, like, this starts going, and these kids are learning wrestling, right? Like, they're trying hard. They're doing more push-ups. They're struggling through tough positions, and this is, this is great, right? This is great. So I'm like, man, I was like, I wonder if this would work for adults. I go, but I can't tell, like, a boardroom, or I can't stand up in a briefing with the Secret Service, and say, hey, crisscross applesauce. So I got to, like, professionalize this a little bit. So I changed, listen with your whole body to actively engage your environment, right? And what I mean by that is, look, when you're in a meeting, pay attention, right? Don't be like, yes, I will get the milk, honey. No, the kids don't have soccer tonight. Look, man, it's a half hour. It's 15 minutes. It's 45 minutes. Actively engage that environment. So like a level 1 engagement, like one of my employees comes in and wants to talk to me about, they had a problem over the weekend with their spouse or something, like, join the club. All of us did, but it's important for me to hear this, right? So I know where their head's at. So I'm not perfect at it, right? But my goal is to stop what I'm doing, turn myself around, actively engage what that person is saying, right? That's like a level 1 engagement. Level 10 engagement are now bullets are flying, they're hitting the side of an armored car. I need to be fully plugged into that, right? And then all those things in between. My second thing is the whole do your best, is demonstrate performance, right? You've got to know your job, and you've got to be good at it. You don't have to be the best, but you should strive for that. But I need to demonstrate performance, and kind of when we talked about off air, is the physical fitness and appearance aspect of this. And being a DEA agent, and a lot of your listeners who are in law enforcement know that there are studies upon studies upon studies done by the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit about attacks on law enforcement officers. And when you read these studies and when you listen to the interviews of these assailants, they select their targets. And I remember when I was in the training academy, I was reading one of the depositions, or one of the interviews. This assailant was talking about, total degenerate, destitute guy, was at the end of his rope and had just made a decision. He was gonna either kill a cop or do a death by cop. So the week he had done it, he had several interactions with law enforcement. His first interaction, he got pulled over by a state trooper. I forget the state, but state troopers are pretty consistent. Male state trooper gets out of the car, fit guy, polished, mirror sunglasses, hat, walks up to the car. Guy's got a gun on, and has an interaction with the trooper, gets a ticket, goes away. And they're like, well, why didn't you kill him? I didn't think I could. He looked professional. He looked like, I don't think I could have got the jump on him. Now, maybe he could have, maybe he couldn't have, but he looked that way. Gets pulled over a second time that week, female officer, but also very professional, very calm when she approaches the car, also presented herself properly. Why didn't you kill her? Well, I thought I could have taken her, but she looked sharp, and if it didn't have worked out, I didn't want to have to go to jail and tell the other inmates I had my ass kicked and was arrested by a female cop. Okay, this is the mentality.
Yeah.
Third person pulls him over, police officer, male, gets out of the car, overweight, disheveled appearance. This is how perceptive this guy was, man. He probably didn't have a 5th grade education, but he says when he got up to the car, I noticed that the keeper on his holster had dust on it, so I know he hadn't been training. So that's why I shot him and killed him. Wow. So, you know, it's that demonstrating performance, right? Like, you're being sized up as a Secret Service agent at all times by the crowd. Maybe you're being sized up in a good way, right? Like, agents all the time get this on a rope line. Man, you look like a Secret Service agent. I'm glad you're here protecting. Thank you for being here protecting us and protecting our president. Okay, maybe you're being sized up in a good way, but you're still being sized up, right? Yeah. Or maybe you're being sized up in a bad way, like, I want to kill that guy, but those 3 right there, I don't think I could get to him. But those 2 right there, you know, like, so to think that that's not happening to you, you didn't pay attention in training, because it is. So you got to be able to demonstrate performance. You've got to be able to build partnerships, right? Part of that demonstrating performance isn't just PTing and shooting, right? It's being able to go into a local police department and finding some common ground with that sheriff or that chief and telling him, I'm going to need 300 of your guys for 15 hours on Saturday, right? And you know, making sure that he understands why that's necessary and why we need those assets, right? Or you're in a foreign country like Yemen and you're in the Ministry of Interior, and you know, where you know, candidly, we don't have much in common, right? Myself and who I was speaking with, but we've got to find some common ground to get the job done. So, you know, there's different ways to demonstrate that performance, and you may have to wear different hats. Like, I remember I was in Detroit, and I was speaking to one of the new agents who was in my squad. We became very good friends. He's now a supervisor, and I'm like, hey man, you know, this is one of the only jobs where you could be in a crack house in the morning and a boardroom in the afternoon. It was kind of like a cliche. And there was a day in Detroit, we hit a crack house in the morning for counterfeit, and there was a network intrusion of a company, and we responded in suits that afternoon to their boardroom. And I'm like, Chris, I said this, I was just talking shit. I didn't realize, I was like making a cliche. I was like, we're in a crack house this morning, and we're in a boardroom in suits this afternoon. I mean, this is crazy. What other job in the world do you do that? Yeah. You know, so that demonstration of performance. I mean, this kid was on an entry team. I mean, he's a grown man, guy now, but he was on an entry team to hit a house for counterfeit money at 5 a.m. and plug it into somebody's computer to do a data dump and see where the breach was that afternoon. Like, what a job, man. Yeah. You know. So, and then the third thing is to have fun. Is you got to have passion for what you're doing. You know, whether it's being a Secret Service agent as a whole, or whether if you want to shrink it down and like being a leader, you got to really want to do that, right? And understand what comes with that. It's like, you know, some people, they love being a leader, you know, when it's going well, when you're getting your butt kissed, when it's yes sir, oh here's your seat sir, oh we saved you a spot here, oh you know, but then when it's time to make hard decisions, or when it's time to put yourself in front of the fire, right? There's folks that they don't want any part of that leadership, right? And so I think you need to, you know, when you decide you want to be a leader, you need to realize that there's a full yin to that yang there, and there's things that are going to be not so glamorous about that the folks that work with you not want you to do, but you're going to need to do. You know, you're going to need to do that, and if you're not up for that part of it, you know, your leadership's probably not for you.
Yeah. Okay, a couple last topics I want to hit on you. Why? I know there's a lot of talk in the public about why people haven't heard more about the Trump assassination. Mm-hmm. Can you just kind of explain to the audience from a Secret Service perspective mm-hmm. why we haven't heard more about that?
Yeah. So number one, I think everybody that testified in front of Congress, I think their depositions are transcribed on the internet, so it's public. You could search it and find it. I don't know where it is, but yeah. You could search it and find it and read them. So you could get a lot of information. I think just from that. I mean, it's not a secret. But as far as the investigation, so the Secret Service doesn't do the investigation there. what happens in any critical incident, we maintain what we call an interim federal presence. So there was an incident, we hold the scene, and then the FBI is the investigating agency. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Like, we wouldn't investigate our own crimes. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't look clean, right? If we did our own investigation of like a butler, for example.
Yeah.
So the FBI does that investigation. And then it's pretty typical, and I don't want to speak for the FBI, but it's pretty typical for law enforcement that we don't comment on active investigations.
Right.
So I think it's not some big conspiracy. It could be, but in my opinion, again, my opinion only, it's not some big conspiracy. It's just the way the protocol works.
Okay. How did law enforcement affect your family?
Well, obviously the travel is the best and worst part of this job, right? So you're going a lot. But I was lucky that the bulk of like when I was really traveling like at a super high operational tempo consistently, like I was on a for most people that's a protective detail. For me, that was when I was overseas. So I didn't have a family then, right? Like I was dating my now wife, but I didn't have children. So I kind of was lucky in that regard. I'll be working until I'm 90 because my kids are young now. But from that perspective, me being gone all the time didn't affect my kids. And now, my boys are 10 years old, but I'm a SAC, so I don't get called to travel as much as a normal agent does. I do travel some, but it's nowhere near the amount of travel that the agents are doing.
But do you think your job affected your first marriage?
Probably to be fair to her, probably from an ego perspective, I thought I was, I'm a Secret Service agent. I don't need to do what you.
Yeah. Okay. How about from your boys? I mean, they're 10. Do they think Dad's cool?
They do, man. I have a great relationship with my kids, and maybe I'm trying to make up for lost time because I always wanted that, when I was a kid, and I'm sure a psychologist would have a field day with that and other things, right? But yeah, I mean, I coach, I coach their wrestling, I coach their jiu-jitsu. We were talking in the car one day, and I was just talking about, the mandatory retirement age at 57. And I'm like, I made the joke. I'm like, I'm gonna have to work, something after, besides Secret Service. You guys are too expensive, And they're like, Dad, no. They're like, we love you being a Secret Service. We don't want you to leave the Secret Service. One thing, if I could talk about the community here in the Jacksonville area proper, this is a very, very tight law enforcement community. Very tight. And it's a well-respected profession down here in Florida, in North Florida anyway.
Law enforcement in general.
Yeah, and so, up north there's some different feelings. I'm not saying right or wrong. Right. I'm just saying there was definitely a different feeling on that in Minnesota than there is here.
Yeah.
And my boys, let's face it, they get the residual benefits of that, of their dad being a Secret Service agent. Not in the form of anything tangible, but it's people like, oh my God, your dad's a Secret. They think it's cool. And I'm friends with people in the law enforcement community. So the patrol officer will stop by the house, they see us out, and they're like, this is cool, and it's just. They like that kind of stuff, man. So they like it. I mean, when I'm gone, they don't love it. But I'm generally, the campaign I was gone a lot, but generally in non-campaign times, I'm not gone that much.
Was your wife? Is she from Bulgaria?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Do you think? What's her take on your career? Do you think it's different from a Bulgarian's point of view versus an American woman looking at law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, how it goes, man. To her, I'm just like, I was giving a leadership speech to this. It was like an insurance company, I think, and I'm like, the question they normally ask, right, is like, how do you separate, like, your work from your family? But I'll answer your question the same way. Is like, I get called sir a lot at work, right? It's yes sir, no sir, hey sir, can you do this, hey sir. When I get home, I get called a lot of things. Sir is not one of them. So I think, to my wife, like, to other people, she'd probably tell them that, hey, my husband's the agent in charge. But to me, it's like she would never give me that grace to be able to. So, Bulgarian law enforcement, it's the same but different, right? Like, talk about a priority on fitness and martial arts training. There's not a person in uniform over there walking that doesn't have a skill level of martial arts training, whether it's judo, sambo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing. Like they're different than us. Their academy is like, I think it's 2 or 3 years long. You go to like police university, and I remember I was given a presentation on canine training when I was over there in Bulgaria, and I was kind of describing the different drives of dogs, like prey drive, fight drive, and I was like, in defense, and I was like, hey, when we're we want these dogs to have a good fight drive, right, where they're kind of more like. I said, well, does anyone in this room train combat sports? The whole room raised their hand, and afterwards with one of the coordinators I was talking, he's like, hey man, we start training this stuff when we're little, and all through our academy, we maintain that level of training. So, they like, if you got in a fight with a Bulgarian cop, like, you're gonna get it, man. Like, those guys are tough, because they're trained, right? And so, like, that's where I do agree with the gentleman you mentioned, that like, we need to start tracking this maybe from a younger age. Like, you want a total revolution in having, like, start in high school, right? Like, start having police science training or law enforcement or criminal justice training in high school, and then start teaching jiu-jitsu or judo or wrestling, or, and as curriculum, not as an extracurricular sport, but as curriculum, up through there. Then in college, have that part of your criminal justice is a great degree. You learn a lot about law, but you don't learn what to do when you're enforcing the law.
Right.
You learn that in a 6-month academy, right? That's 6 months. I mean, and then how often do you do it after that? Yeah. So, like, think about if you had 4 years of high school, 4 years of college of jiu-jitsu, and then an academy that was a year long. Yeah. Now you've got 9 years of training. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Now maybe you only do need to train once or twice a week because you've got that foundation.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Can you look back from when you started as an officer to now? Has law enforcement affected the way that you see people in society?
Yeah, sure. I mean, come on. I think anybody, if you spend almost 30 years doing one thing, it's gonna affect the way you look at things and look at people, right? And so, like, it doesn't affect me to where I look at I don't think everybody's a criminal. I don't think everybody's bad. I don't think everybody needs to go to jail, right? But I think, I'm certainly cautious. I'm nervous about my kids at school sometimes. Like, one of the first people I made friends with was the school resource officer at my kid's school, right? Because it's like, these things seem to happen more and more often. I think that you can definitely see things coming sooner, right? When you have a background like this, and but I don't look at it. I don't look at everybody as a scumbag. I don't look at everybody as a suspect. I don't look at everybody. I'm probably more cautious and ask more questions about people than I should, or that make them comfortable sometimes. But yeah, I think anyone who does this for a living, is gonna see people like that.
Yeah. Can you look back on your career? Is there any mistakes that you made, or anything that you would do different?
Oh, I mean, I made thousands of mistakes. I probably wouldn't do anything different. Yeah, I mean, I make mistakes every day, man. It's just part of being human.
I mean, would you, like, for example, somebody's asked me this. For the listeners, some of you may not know this, but there's a thrift savings plan where you put money away. Would you have put more money away? Or for that matter, would you have decided, instead of Bulgaria, if you had had to do it over again, would you have really tried to get Rome or?
Yeah, so okay, I'll answer the thrift first. Like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not a financial advisor. You can come see where I live and you'll figure that out pretty quick. But yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, the more money you can sock away, the better. Don't get divorced, because you're going to lose a lot of your money there. Would be another word of advice, or get a good prenuptial agreement. You know, so as far as money, like, you know, one of the other things I would do is if you're on the job, if you carry a badge and gun, I mean, I would start training jiu-jitsu like yesterday. And I mean, like, people are probably like, you sick of me hearing it. But I would get into a sustainable, realistic physical fitness program and start training jiu-jitsu if you're not already right now. And you know, I was talking with a very close dear friend of mine on the job who's, you know, just done everything in this organization. And, you know, we have, you know, really spirited discussions. And he was like, you know, he's like, you know, with you, it's like, you know, the only thing you care about is like jiu-jitsu and fitness. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, it's not the only thing I care about. It's not the only thing you need, but it's the first thing. It's the first thing when people see you.
Yeah.
And those studies from the FBI confirm that. But I'm telling you, man, being fit and being trained are going to give you a sense of comfort when you're working. That's going to transfer over to the general public you're interacting with, and quite frankly, even transfer over to suspects you're interacting with. It's great. If you're not doing it, I mean, I would start like yesterday. I know people all over the United States, all over the world that have jiu-jitsu schools. Most of them give law enforcement discounts. Like if any of your listeners are interested, please just message me, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'll find you a place. Myself, personally, I will do it for you.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing I would say, if you haven't done it, I would do it. You know, everybody gets, you know, I wanted to protect the president. I was never on the president's detail. I guess that's one kind of, it's not even a regret, man, because you know, as the SAC in Minneapolis and SAC here, like, I've been around presidents a lot doing protection, and trust me, it's a lot easier doing it as the agent in charge of the field office than it is being on their detail. Right. A lot easier. Right. So I've kind of had the Cliff Notes version of that, and I've gotten to kind of ride on, you know, wear the badge and get the Air Force One certificate, but I haven't had to put in the sweat equity. So, you know, I feel like a little bit of a poser in that respect, but. You know, I mean, man, I think if you look at life like that, you're going to get caught in a pattern, and then you don't appreciate what you've been able to do, right? So are there things I would have done different career choice wise? Depends on what the other options were. Yeah. You know, at the time, I made the best decision I thought I could make. Like, yeah, when I was leaving. When I was in the training academy, I could have said, no, I don't want to go overseas. I want to go to a counter assault team, right? Yeah. But I would have never met my wife, okay? Right. When I was coming from Bulgaria, I went to Detroit. I could have said, no, I'm going to go somewhere else. When my kids were born, they both had severe medical issues. They were 10 weeks premature. My one son, his prognosis was horrific. Wheelchair, braces at best, non-ambulatory. You'll be lucky if he can form a sentence. He had a stroke, aneurysm in his brain, terrible prognosis. Luckily, the University of Michigan Hospital pediatric unit there was one of the best in the world. So maybe if I didn't go to Detroit, my son now walks, talks, runs, competitive jiu-jitsu athlete, speaks 2 languages, fluent in Bulgarian and English. He's in the same class as his brother, gets good grades in school. You know, little quirks, but don't we all? So maybe if I wouldn't have went to Detroit, then, you know, he wouldn't have been born there, right? So and wouldn't have had the outcome he had. Yeah. You know, trust me, I'm not an eternal optimist either, man. I have my days, but I think if you live life with regrets and you know, and wishing there was a reset button, you're going to drive yourself crazy, brother, because it's just not the way things are. Yeah.
2 quick ones, and then before we hit the last topic, what's a Secret Service agent wear for his watch?
Okay, I don't know what other Secret Service wear, but I wear a Panerai. I have 2. They're the only watches I have. How I got into these was, remember that high net worth event I was telling you about earlier in the thing? Yeah. Okay, so one of the private security guys had one on, and I was like, what is that thing? He explained me the history of the watch. I was a GS5 at the time, so wasn't in the cards right away, but when I finally got overseas and went back to Rome, I bought my first one, and then my mother had given me a very generous gift for my 40th birthday, and I got this for my 40th. So. Yeah, I mean, you know, I know there's like Instagram pages and websites on it, but I'm a Panerai. I love the history of them. I love how they look. I'm a bigger guy, so it doesn't get swallowed up on my hand. And this thing's been all over the world, man. Panerais have been to Yemen, Libya, to Gaza City, you know, different places in Africa, Eastern Europe, Bosnia, Albania. You know, you name it, they've been there. So. Or not Albania, Kosovo. I'm sorry, I've never been to Albania. Yeah, that's my go-to.
Okay. What do Secret Service agents carry these days? What's the duty weapon?
The Glock. We went from the SIG to the Glock. So,
17, 19?
19.
19.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Last thing we want to talk about.
Yep.
Tell me about. Okay, you guys have got a real recruiting push right now for Secret Service. Tell me about it.
Yes, my agency would kill me if I didn't talk about this. I probably wouldn't be allowed to do this again. Look, like I think like any profession at this point, right? It just seems like everybody's looking for good people, law enforcement especially, right? So we have a huge recruiting push right now for agents and uniformed division officers, and you could go to secretservice.gov/careers, and we have some incentives, quite frankly, like I'm jealous of, right? So for just an agent or an officer, we're giving a $40,000 signing bonus. So if you make it through the hiring process with the Secret Service, which is vigorous, get hired and complete training. I think there's a payment after training gets completed, then after a year, then after, I don't know, 18 months. I'm not sure of the structure. You can look on the website, but there's also links to the usajobs.gov hiring links right there on the web page. And then if you have tactical experience, I think it's a $60,000 bonus. So if you're a former military or police on a SWAT team or tactical team, or have combat arms experience, and make it through the process, I think you get a $60,000 bonus. Wow. So this is like private sector stuff, man. I mean, the federal government doesn't. They've never done it since I've been, you know, and I've been with them for 26 years. So,
what are the requirements to be a Secret Service agent, or uniform for that matter? Either one.
Yeah. So again, you can look and get all the requirements there. But again, physically fit, clean criminal history. You know, our drug policy is on the website. You can look at it and make sure you meet the criteria there. For the agent side. They like to see a little bit more experience, although we do have what's called the STAR program, which we try to identify exceptional applicants that maybe don't quite have the experience we want, but have other things like college sports, or you know, very high grades, or you know, just live their life in a certain way. Mm-hmm. So you know, there's a lot of options out there, man. If anyone's thinking about a career in the Secret Service, like, you know, when I applied, it was like typed applications. It took 2 years for me to get hired. You know, now, you know, I'm very, very jealous of the opportunities a young man or woman could have to come on this job. And things are changing, right? I mean, the mission's changing, the dynamic of law enforcement in general is changing. It's you know, there's things like AI and technology-based countermeasures that you know, we're using. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity right now.
How about college degree? Do you have to have one?
For I don't want to mess this up.
Okay.
But I believe technically by OPM guidelines, you don't need a college degree, but you got to think about, we're getting desirable candidates.
Right.
And they're all going to have college degrees. So if you don't have one, does that make you highly desirable, right? I mean, you know, I would say get your degree and apply, because you're just not going to have the life experience, right?
Yeah. Joe, thank you very much for the interview. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I had a really good time, Niles. Thanks.
Good. All right. Thanks.